The words hung in the sterile air of the HR office, sharp and cold as shattered glass. We're moving in a new, more dynamic direction, Eleanor. Your position has been made redundant. Redundant. At 62, after 30 years of pouring my heart and soul into this company, I was being called redundant by a 28-year-old CEO in a hoodie. They thought they were just deleting a line item from a budget. They had no idea they were deleting the one person who held the digital keys to the entire kingdom. They fired me for being old, but in their youthful arrogance, they forgot one tiny, critical detail: the master password. This is a story about how a lifetime of experience became the ultimate weapon. If you believe that karma is best served digitally, subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because you don't want to miss a single line of this code. Part 1. The CEO, a boy named Bryce who called himself a disruptor, couldn't even look me in the eye. He stared at a point just over my shoulder, spouting corporate jargon like a malfunctioning chatbot. It's not personal, Eleanor. It's about cultivating a forward-thinking, high-energy culture. We're offering you a generous severance package to help with your transition. My transition? Was that a euphemism for my impending shuffle into the grave? I looked from his face, barely old enough to have voted in 2 presidential elections, to the HR manager, a woman who looked like she was born the same year I wrote the company's first line of code. They both had the same plastic, insincere smiles. I had built the digital architecture of Etheria Solutions from the ground up. I wasn't just an employee. I was the company's institutional memory, its digital ghost. I designed the servers, the security protocols, the proprietary software that was the lifeblood of our entire operation. In the early days, it was just me and the founder, David, working out of his garage. He had the vision, I had the technical skill. We were partners. After David passed away a few years ago and the venture capitalists installed Bryce, the soul of the company began to fade, replaced by buzzwords and kombucha on tap. Still, I stayed. Out of loyalty to David's memory, out of love for the complex, beautiful system I had created. I didn't argue or plead. My pride wouldn't allow it. I simply nodded, my face a calm, placid mask that betrayed none of the volcanic fury erupting in my chest. I understand, I said, my voice even. I gathered the box of my personal effects, a picture of my late husband, a coffee mug my daughter had painted, a small potted plant, and walked through the open plan office. I could feel the eyes of the younger employees on me, a mixture of pity and relief. She's old. Our jobs are safe. They saw a relic being put out to pasture. As the security guard, a man I'd known for 15 years, escorted me to the door, he had tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," he whispered. I just squeezed his arm. When I got home, I didn't cry. I made a cup of tea, sat in my favorite armchair, and opened my personal laptop. I navigated to a secure, encrypted portal that only I knew existed. A single line of code blinked on the screen, awaiting a command. This portal was the failsafe, the master key I had built into the core of Etheria's system 20 years ago. It was a dead man's switch designed to protect the company from a hostile takeover. I had never imagined I would be the one to use it, or that the hostile takeover would come from within. They had taken my keycard, my email access, my dignity. But they had forgotten about the one key they didn't even know existed. The one that could bring the entire billion-dollar company to its knees. Will this forgotten key unlock a shocking karmic revenge? This story of a carefully guarded secret is just getting started. If you're hooked, keep watching to see how it all unravels. Part 2. Etheria Solutions wasn't always a palace of glass and steel. It was born in a dusty garage amidst the hum of servers and the smell of stale pizza. David was the dreamer, a brilliant visionary who saw how technology could change the world. I was the builder. While he charmed investors, I worked 18-hour days, turning his grand ideas into elegant, functional code. We weren't just colleagues. We were family. The company culture reflected that. We celebrated birthdays, supported each other through personal crises, and believed in the work we were doing. Our core American value was simple: innovation powered by integrity. Then came the money. After David's passing, the board, hungry for aggressive growth, brought in Bryce Calloway. He was a Silicon Valley cliché, a young man who had sold a moderately successful app and now believed he was Steve Jobs reincarnated. He replaced our collaborative ethos with a cutthroat work hard, play harder culture. He installed sleep pods and a ping-pong table, but dismantled the very human connections that had made us strong. He saw the older employees, the ones who remembered the garage days, not as assets, but as liabilities. We were legacy systems, slow and incompatible with his new, fast-paced operating system. He saw our experience as a bug, not a feature. My primary antagonist was Bryce, but he was a symptom of a larger disease, the systemic ageism that plagues corporate America. He surrounded himself with a coterie of young, ambitious VPs who mirrored his thinking. They viewed me with a kind of polite condescension, calling me sweetheart in meetings and explaining basic tech concepts to me as if I were a confused grandmother who had wandered into the building. They were blind to the fact that the entire infrastructure they were using, the very platform that generated their paychecks, was a product of my mind. The supporting characters in this drama were the other veteran employees who had been pushed out one by one, and a few loyal younger engineers, like Leo, whom I had mentored. Leo had tried to warn me, telling me in hushed tones about closed-door meetings where Bryce had called my department the dinosaur farm. I had appreciated his loyalty but underestimated the speed and ruthlessness of Bryce's agenda. What is this hidden key that can change everything? Part 3. The chaos didn't start with a bang. It started with a flicker. On Monday morning, 2 days after my unceremonious firing, the company's internal servers experienced a minor glitch. Access to the archival data, the bedrock of their client history, became intermittent. The new head of IT, a wunderkind Bryce had poached from a competitor, assured everyone it was a simple server migration issue. By Tuesday, the glitch had spread. The proprietary software, the crown jewel of Etheria, began randomly demanding a Level 7 administrative authorization for routine functions. The problem was, there was no Level 7. I was Level 6. Level 7 was a phantom protocol I had designed, a digital tripwire. The system was asking for a password that didn't exist. Panic began to ripple through the company. I knew this because my phone started ringing. First, it was former colleagues, asking in hushed, worried tones if I knew what was going on. I feigned ignorance. "Oh my, that sounds serious. I'm sure the new team has it under control." Then came the call from the new IT head himself. His voice, usually so full of arrogant confidence, was strained. "Eleanor," he started, trying to sound casual. "We're running into a little legacy code issue I thought you might be able to shed some light on. A ghost in the machine, so to speak." "A ghost," I replied, my voice a perfect blend of polite confusion and elderly innocence. "That sounds spooky. I'm afraid I can't help you, son. As per my termination agreement, I'm not authorized to access or discuss Etheria's systems. You wouldn't want me to violate my severance agreement, would you?" I could practically hear his teeth grinding. The conflict was escalating. The digital fortress I had built was holding strong, and they were beginning to realize that the person they had thrown out was the only one with a key. Every polite "no" I gave was another brick in the wall they were running into at full speed. They had fired the gatekeeper, and now they were locked out of their own castle. The obstacle wasn't a bug in the system. The obstacle was the system itself, doing exactly what I had designed it to do: protect itself from unauthorized, incompetent leadership. Will a secret from the past turn the tables? Part 4. The pressure intensified with the introduction of a ticking clock. The annual Etheria Innovate Conference, their biggest client-facing event of the year, was scheduled for Friday. The centerpiece of the conference was a live, real-time demonstration of their new flagship software, Odyssey. It was the project Bryce had staked his entire reputation on. And Odyssey was completely, hopelessly integrated with the core systems that were now malfunctioning. Without a stable connection to the archival data and the proprietary algorithms, the demo would be an epic public failure. My inside source, Leo, was feeding me updates. The office was in a state of controlled chaos. Bryce was holding marathon war room meetings, yelling at his team of whiz kids who were failing to bypass my architecture. They were throwing everything they had at it, but my code was a labyrinth of their own making. Every time they broke through one wall, they found themselves in another, more complex trap. The complexity deepened because this wasn't just about a password. My system was designed to recognize and reject brute force. The more they tried to hack their way in, the more the system locked itself down, purging data caches and rerouting permissions in a beautiful, self-healing cascade of defiance. The subplot involving Leo became crucial. He wasn't just giving me information, he was my moral compass. "They're losing their minds in here, Eleanor," he said in a late-night call. "But they're also blaming the junior developers, threatening people's jobs. This is hurting good people." His words resonated with me. My vengeance was never about destroying the company or hurting the innocent employees. It was about surgically removing the cancer at the top. This new information forced me to refine my strategy. I couldn't just let the system crash and burn. I had to control the demolition, ensuring the fallout hit only the intended targets. The pressure was now on me as well. I had to time my next move perfectly to save the company from the very man who was supposed to be leading it. But will the next event shock everyone? Part 5. Friday morning. The day of the conference. Leo sent me a one-word text, "Showtime." I imagined the scene, the convention hall filled with clients, investors, and tech journalists. The stage lights warming up. And backstage, a meltdown of epic proportions. At precisely 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes before Bryce was scheduled to take the stage for his keynote address, my phone rang. The caller ID simply said, "Bryce Calloway." I let it ring 3 times before answering, my voice calm and pleasant. "Hello, Eleanor." His voice was a raw nerve of pure, unadulterated panic. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a terrified young man. "Eleanor, you have to help us. The Odyssey demo, it's completely dark. The system is offline. We're facing a catastrophe." "Oh dear," I said, with the same tone I might use for a spilled glass of milk. "That sounds terribly stressful." "Don't play games with me," he yelled, then immediately reined himself in. I could hear the desperation in his breathing. "Please. I know this is about what happened. It was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. Whatever you want, Eleanor. Money, a new contract, anything. Just tell us the master password. We have 10 minutes before I have to go on that stage and face career suicide." This was the moment, the turning point where the power dynamic didn't just shift, it shattered and reformed with me at the absolute center. "There is no password, Bryce," I said calmly. "What? What do you mean there's no password? My entire IT team says the system is demanding a master key." "It is," I agreed. "But it's not a password. It's not something I can tell you. The master key is a biometric encryption protocol. It's keyed to my retinal scan and my voice print, authenticated through a secure, off-site server. It's not a string of characters, Bryce. It's me. The system isn't asking for a password. It's asking for me." The silence on the other end of the line was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a god king realizing he was just a mortal. The sound of a disruptor being completely and utterly disrupted. He didn't just need my knowledge, he needed my physical presence. He had fired the ghost from the machine, and now he needed that ghost to come back and save him. "Get a car," I said, my voice hardening. "Send it to my address. And Bryce, you will meet me at the service entrance. We wouldn't want to cause a scene. How will this shocking secret change their lives forever? This jaw-dropping twist has you hooked? Subscribe for more stories of karma that prove you should never underestimate experience. Part 6. A black town car screeched to a halt in front of my house less than 20 minutes later. The ride to the convention center was silent. When we arrived, just as I had instructed, Bryce was waiting for me at the loading dock, next to a pile of empty catering trays. His face was pale, his expensive hoodie was rumpled, and the look in his eyes was one of pure, humiliating defeat. The boy king was waiting at the servants' entrance for the old woman he had discarded. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He led me through the backstage labyrinth, a chaotic mess of wires and panicked stagehands. When his executive team saw me, their jaws collectively dropped. They looked at me as if they were seeing an apparition. The new IT head, the one who had patronized me on the phone, couldn't meet my gaze. I ignored them all, walking straight to the portable command center they had set up. On the main screen, a single ominous message glowed: System lockout. Level 7 authentication required. I didn't speak. I simply leaned into the retinal scanner they hastily plugged into the terminal and spoke a short passphrase into the microphone. On the screen, the ominous red message vanished, replaced by a cascade of green text: Authentication confirmed. Welcome back. E. Vance. All systems nominal. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. The Odyssey demo software flickered to life, its elegant user interface appearing on the monitors just as the announcer on stage was introducing Bryce. The immediate consequence was a complete inversion of the power structure. Bryce had to go on that stage and deliver his keynote, knowing that the only reason he wasn't being booed off was because of me. The entire executive team, the ones who had silently endorsed my firing, now knew that their careers had been saved by the very person they deemed obsolete. My vengeance wasn't loud or explosive. It was a silent, technical coup d'état. The reaction was a mixture of awe from the tech team and pure, unadulterated terror from the executives. They no longer saw a redundant, old woman. They saw a person who held their entire world in the palm of her hand. Will she overcome this new challenge? Part 7. My return to Etheria was not as an employee, but as the company's most expensive and powerful independent consultant. My contract, which Bryce signed without even reading in his desperation, gave me unprecedented authority. The challenge now was not technical, but strategic. My growth in this chapter was about moving beyond the initial, satisfying act of vengeance and embracing the role of a true leader. I wasn't there just to gloat. I was there to fix what was broken. I started by conducting a full system diagnostic, a task for which I was uniquely qualified. But my audit went beyond the code. I began to look at the human systems Bryce had put in place. I interviewed the junior developers he had been scapegoating, the veteran salespeople he had sidelined, the administrative staff he had ignored. I discovered a company rotting from the inside out, plagued by low morale, inefficient workflows, and a culture of fear. My purpose transformed. This was no longer just about teaching Bryce a lesson. It was about saving David's company. My transformation was visible in my actions. I didn't sit in a corner office. I walked the floors. I used my newfound authority to halt 3 of Bryce's most idiotic and expensive vanity projects, presenting the board with data that showed they were a massive drain on resources with no clear path to profitability. I reinstated 2 of the experienced senior engineers Bryce had fired, and their return was a huge morale boost for the entire department. Bryce was forced to watch, a powerless figurehead, as I systematically dismantled his toxic legacy and began to restore the company's core values. He had tried to put me out to pasture, but I had returned as the shepherd, and I was now separating the sheep from the wolves. The arc of my own character was completing. I had moved from a hurt victim to a vengeful ghost in the machine, and now, finally, to the company's rightful guardian. But what awaits her in the next confrontation? Part 8. The board of directors, initially relieved by the averted conference disaster, was now growing increasingly alarmed. They were receiving two completely different reports about the state of the company. Bryce's reports were full of optimistic jargon and carefully manipulated data, painting a picture of temporary setbacks on the path to glory. My reports were concise, factual, and brutal. They detailed the systemic vulnerabilities, the financial waste, and the critical employee retention problems. The board, composed of shrewd investors who cared more about stability than sleep pods, realized they had a serious leadership crisis on their hands. The final conflict was set. They called an emergency board meeting. The agenda, a full review of executive leadership and the recent security incidents. This was to be the final showdown. Bryce knew his career was on the line. He spent the days leading up to the meeting preparing a defense, gathering his loyal VPs to create a narrative that would paint me as a saboteur, a disgruntled former employee who had created the crisis herself to regain power. My preparation was different. I wasn't preparing a defense. I was preparing an indictment. With Leo's help, I compiled a comprehensive dossier. It included not just the financial data and employee testimonials, but also the logs from the system itself, which showed the panicked, amateurish attempts by Bryce's team to bypass my security. It was a digital trail of their incompetence. I also resolved the main subplot. I drafted a proposal for a new leadership structure, one that would empower experienced engineers and create a clear succession plan, ensuring the company would never again be vulnerable to the whims of a single, arrogant CEO. The tension was at its peak. The future of Etheria would be decided in that one room. Part 9. The boardroom was a theater of corporate warfare. Bryce stood at the head of the polished table, delivering a slick presentation full of charts and buzzwords. He was trying to reassert his dominance, framing the glitch as a successful stress test of their new IT team's capabilities. He then pivoted to an attack. What we have here, he said, gesturing towards me, is a case of a disgruntled former employee with legacy access who held this company hostage for personal gain. He thought it was a powerful accusation. It was a fatal mistake. When it was my turn, I didn't use a PowerPoint. I simply had Samuel Henderson, David's old lawyer and a trustee of his estate, join the meeting via video call. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," I began, "Bryce is correct about one thing. This was about legacy. David's legacy." I then laid out my findings, calmly and factually. I presented the data on employee turnover, the millions wasted on Bryce's pet projects, the decline in product quality. Then, I addressed the hostage situation. The security protocol that was triggered was not an act of sabotage, I explained. It's called the Guardian Protocol. I designed it with David 20 years ago. It is a dormant feature of the system's core architecture, designed to activate only under specific conditions of gross mismanagement that threaten the company's integrity. It is not keyed to me out of vanity. It is keyed to me because David's last directive in his technical will stated that I was the only person he trusted to be the system's final guardian. Samuel Henderson confirmed it. He read from David's technical will, a document the board had never seen. The revelation was a thunderclap. My actions were not vengeance. They were the execution of the founder's final wishes. Bryce's face went from pale to ghostly white. He hadn't just fired an old employee, he had violated the sacred last will of the company's creator. The climax was not a vote on my fate, but on his. The board's decision was swift and unanimous. Bryce Calloway was terminated, effective immediately. Then, the chairman of the board turned to me. "Eleanor," he said, his voice filled with a respect I had not heard in years. "It seems we have been guilty of gross mismanagement ourselves. We would like to offer you the position of interim CEO to guide this company back to the principles on which it was founded." My transformation was complete. The vengeance was not just personal. It was a restoration of order, a fulfillment of a promise to my old friend. But how will this change their future? Part 10. My tenure as interim CEO became permanent 6 months later. The changes at Etheria were profound. The ping-pong table and sleep pods were replaced with better healthcare benefits and a robust mentorship program. I rehired several of the experienced engineers Bryce had cast aside, creating a new innovation council that blended their veteran wisdom with the energy of our younger talent. Leo became the new head of IT, a position he had earned through loyalty and skill. The company culture began to heal. The fear and uncertainty were replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. We focused on our products, our clients, and our people. The stock price, which had been volatile under Bryce, stabilized and began a steady climb. The long-term consequence of my vengeance was not destruction, but a radical, necessary course correction. I had saved the company from itself. My own life changed as well. I found a new energy, a new passion for the work. I was no longer a ghost in the machine, but its heart, its mind, and its soul. I never saw Bryce again, though I heard he had failed to launch another startup and was last seen consulting. He had become what he had accused me of being, redundant. The emotional resolution was not in his failure, but in my success, and in the thriving, healthy company that stood as a testament to the idea that experience is not a liability, but the most valuable asset of all. One evening, I walked through the quiet office. I saw a group of young female engineers huddled around a monitor, working late on a difficult problem. I walked over, not as the CEO, but as an old coder. I looked at their work, pointed to a single line, and said, "Try refactoring that loop. Your efficiency will triple." They looked at me with awe, then back at the screen as the solution clicked into place. My legacy wasn't in a password, it was in the knowledge I could now pass on to the next generation. Ageism in the workplace is a reality many face, where decades of experience are dismissed in favor of the next new thing. This story is a powerful reminder that wisdom and knowledge are timeless. The most valuable assets of any organization are often the people who built it. Have you ever seen a moment where experience triumphed over arrogance? Has your value ever been underestimated? Share your story in the comments below. We believe in the power of shared experiences. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more tales of karmic justice.